the other lawyers at the table, we create these things called CYA files. I won't say what those initials mean, but you all know what they mean. And he's got one, I promise you. If I'm involved in some scheme and I'm somebody's cover-upper-in-chief, I've covered myself. I've got some records somewhere so that if it all goes wrong, I can say, hey, he knew or she knew. I think he's got files.
What do you think?
Well, on Frank's point, you know, I remember Mr. Mueller and Mr. Comey, when they were both directors of the FBI, briefing members of Congress on investigations, on national security crises, and they would always say the same thing. They would say, we will pursue the facts to a conclusion. Sometimes the facts change and you reach a different conclusion, as you well know. And the supposition that some make that this investigation was intended to pin down a campaign finance violation or something else may very well lead to things that will shock the American people.
Elise, do you think we can still be shocked? We're now talking about a raid on Michael Cohen, who we spotted. Someone on my team spotted him in the lobby of Rockefeller Center. He's well known for going on TV and saying ludicrous things in defense of the president. He describes himself as a Ray Donovan-like figure. He boasted about protecting his friend. And, you know, Michael Avenatti has leveled some pretty serious charges against him and his associates for intimidating Avenatti's client, Stormy Daniels, in the parking lot with his infant. I mean, this is sort of crossed the ludicrous to the potentially very criminally perilous terrain for the president.
If I had to predict just on the moment Donald Trump entered this race on escalators and talking about Mexicans crossing the border to become racist, and he keeps upping the ante in terms of shock value. He always has to, because otherwise you stop paying attention. And you look at, with every escalating scandal, with every outburst, he always is rationing it up a bit. And so that's what he's going to keep doing. And I worry that the ultimate shock is firing Bob Mueller. And so that is why I'm just bracing for when that happens and the crisis and the destabilization of our country that is going to roll.
Let me push back on you. Who creates a crisis? What Republican gets out of their zombie state and is in crisis? I mean, I don't disagree with your predictions about what Donald Trump will do. I simply disagree that any Republican, they are in a Trump-induced stupor, afraid of a tweet. He's tweeted at me. I'm still standing. You know, they are spineless. They have become corrupted by Trumpism. They are so afraid to do the right thing that they follow him down the rabbit hole to do the wrong thing every single time.
Well, they can't, you know, accurately say, well, this is red, this is blue, this is green. We're operating in this alternative universe of Republicans who are, quite frankly, cowards these days. And you look at how it's reported, there was this GOP Senate lunch today, and but nothing was discussed about the potential of Donald Trump firing Bob Mueller.
It's like Stepford senators and Stepford members of Congress.
Well, where are the Democrats?
They are not, look, Republicans are not cowards. They are very courageous when it comes to their re-elections. They will stand up for themselves. When they calculate that Donald Trump...
Let me just tell you something. You used to run elections. You should be able to beat every one of them then.
When they calculate that Donald Trump has become a political liability in the upcoming midterm elections, they will turn on him in a moment. He is in a small number of districts right now, in those 48 districts. Now, the Democrats only need 24. To become the majority in the House, but even then they have a small margin. And so when they wake up to the fact that Donald Trump is going to cost them not only their majority, but the margin in their minority, they will turn on him like the brittle page of an old book.
I don't know. Don't hold your breath. Frank, I want to ask you about timing. I mean, you tell me what you, and mostly because you're always right with your predictions, what's your sense on where these investigations are? I mean, to get to the point where you can get a search warrant for yesterday's raid. Where are they in investigating whatever that's about?
Great question, because a lot of people aren't quite sure what probable cause means. And so let's talk about it for a second. It not only means you're proving to a magistrate that you believe evidence of a crime exists, but that it exists in the place you're seeking to search. Think about that. They searched 3 locations yesterday. So I've been in front of many a magistrate in my career, and they look at you and they go, Frank, so you believe it's in the hotel, why? Think about how long it takes to establish that and prove it to a judge. Your Honor, I saw him go, I've had him under surveillance. I saw him go into the hotel all week with that very same computer that he conducts business on. That's the level of specificity you need for probable cause for locations.
For each location.
That's correct. So this didn't happen overnight. Mueller's had this. He's referred it to the Southern District, and they've worked it for quite some time to get what they got yesterday.
Jeremy Bash, I'm going to give you the last word, and I want to ask you to react to something I heard from a former federal prosecutor who said that it was his sense that because of the incredibly high bar that Sophia talked about to
to dig deeper than anyone else.
There's nothing civil about what this special counsel is doing. This is now a man that has to be brought under control, it would seem to me. Frankly, I can't imagine, because, you know, each of us has to come to terms with our own heart and conscience. I would fire the SOB in 3 seconds if it were me.
That was Lou Dobbs describing Bob Mueller as an SOB. Let that sink in. Joining us from the Washington Post and from Washington, D.C., Robert Costa, political reporter and moderator of Washington Week. Jeremy Bash is still here. Let me read something you tweeted last night that caught my attention. You tweeted, calling around the president's circle, his allies are taken aback, rattled, worried the president has a small legal team that lacks a heavy hitter, worried that Mueller is making big moves, and in essence, prodding the president to finally sit down for an interview. Is it your sense that that interview will still happen?
The president met today with several of his lawyers, and he's talking through his next steps. And at this point, he's being advised, don't fire Rod Rosenstein, the deputy attorney general. Don't fire Bob Mueller. Try to let this process play out a little more. They know, his lawyers know he's itching to talk to the Mueller team, but they also know that could be a perilous legal situation, to say the least.
What are you hearing about the president's sort of impulsivity? What I hear to be the most destabilizing dynamic at the White House right now is his inability to sort of rein in his own emotions. That the spectacle yesterday when he sat down with his war cabinet, one Trump ally said he blew his top like a loon before he went in there. So what we saw on television was, I guess, the president having calmed himself down.
Well, he's always been a combative person. Covering him years ago, he used to tell me during interviews he likes to fight. He loves to fight. And that was kind of a line he used to have. And so this element of his personality has always been there. More alarming in the course of my reporting to his associates and officials inside of the White House is his distress about the Justice Department and his tweets today about witch hunt and attorney-client privilege is dead, he asserted. That kind of thing they really worry could prod a constitutional crisis. Him being angry, him watching television, not news in this White House.
Robert Costa, will you watch this with us? This is Lindsey Graham talking about what would happen if he fired Bob Mueller.
Why are you so confident the president wouldn't fire Bob Mueller? He openly mused about it yesterday.
Because I'm confident that would be the beginning, the end of his presidency, and he's not going to do that.
I haven't seen any indication that the proper process wasn't followed. I know it's painful, but I think the president's too smart to fire Mr. Mueller. If he did, it wouldn't end the investigation. First of all, he can't do that.
There were two Republican senators, two allies of the president, weighed his heart, calling him too smart to do something stupid. Isn't that sometimes the case on Capitol Hill, Robert Costa?
That is the case on Capitol Hill at times. It's a delicate moment, Nicole. I just got off the phone this afternoon with former Speaker Newt Gingrich, former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, getting their take on how this is all unfolding. And they're warning the president and the White House, don't fire Mueller. They think it could split the Republican Party apart. But even these men who are close to the president, they're not going out on a limb and saying they know exactly what President Trump will do.
That seems to be the difference right now in this moment, that the kinds of people that you just named are the kinds of people that, as Mattapuzzo said earlier, call us hysterical when we say, oh my God, he's going to create a constitutional crisis. Those kinds of sources are today saying what you just said. They don't know what the president's going to do.
And there is some new reporting I have in the sense that some people close to the president who have talked to him in the last 24 hours say he believes his people, the populist base, the GOP base, whatever you want to call it, will stick with him, even if Republican leaders do not. And so there are these two kind of camps in his ear as he thinks through these decisions.
Do you have any reporting on where Don McGahn comes down on this? It's been reported that one of the previous times that the president wanted Mueller fired, he sent Don McGahn to do it, and Don McGahn said he would resign before he would carry out that order. Any sense of where Don McGahn's head is? We also know from news organizations that when Donald Trump has talked to Don McGahn and other current and former White House staffers who are now witnesses in the Mueller investigation, that they've had to call back in and report those interactions to Mueller. So Don McGahn certainly trying to play it straight as White House counsel. Any sense on where he comes down today and last night after listening to the president's tirade against all of these Republican appointees? And I understand the interim U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York is a McGahn ally.
McGahn's a complicated figure right now because he's been very quiet over the last 48, 72 hours as this is all played out. But it's important to remember that inside of the White House, McGahn prides himself on being removed from the Russia probe. And he is known to be frustrated with Ty Cobb. He had his differences with John Dowd before Dowd stepped down from being the president's lawyer. McGahn has interviewed with Mueller, has gone over there a couple times over in Southwest Washington to meet with that team. But he himself has really not been advising the president on the Russia probe other than when it comes to Department of Justice issues. On DOJ, you have to go through McGahn in this White House. Otherwise, McGahn stays away. Some of his friends tell me that's the smart move. Stay as much away from Russia stuff as you can.
Robert Costa, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your reporting. We'll be keeping an eye on your Twitter feed for any new scoops. Let's bring the rest of our panel. Joining Frank and me at the table, author and conservative opinion writer Sophia Nelson, who is a former GOP counsel for several House committees, former Democratic Congressman Steve Israel, now chairman of, where are you? Is this new?
It's Long Island University Global Institute.
Well, congratulations.
And Bon Vivant.
See, last time you were here, on a book tour. We're so lucky to have.
That's great. I'm not in Congress. This is exactly where I want to be.
We're all the fun is that. And Elise Jordan, our friend and former aide in the George W. Bush White House and State Department, now an MSNBC analyst, is back. Elise, where are we?
I can't help but to think today that the tide is pushing Donald Trump closer than ever to actually moving to fire Bob Mueller. The impression that Sarah Sanders gave today, that he believes it is within his, when she stated she believes that it's within his power, he believes that. It shows that they are now publicly addressing that they have, yes, discussed all these scenarios.
You agree?
I agree that he's going to fire him. It's how he's going to do it that I think there's a question. I think that he's going to go after Sessions and fire Sessions because the new Attorney General can then go after Rosenstein and then go after Mueller, and then Trump says, I didn't do it. That was the Attorney General. I think if you're Machiavellian, and I think some people at the White House are at this moment, I think they're trying to think through, as you said, Sarah's pretty much admitted, we've talked about it, we think we can do it. I don't think they can do it. I think this is an untested area of the Constitution. I don't think the founders foresaw this one. They have the impeachment, they have the pardon powers, but did they foresee an independent counsel? By the way, on that point, you can't bring someone under control who's independent, right? So all this talk about Lou Dobbs and others, they're out of control.
Well, look, I agree with Elise. I think that the president himself is getting closer than ever. But here's the problem. I think Robert Costa's reporting was so spot on. This becomes a real split in the Republican Party. And, you've got a president who is not in a bubble. He is in a speck of a bubble. So he's listening to a few pundits and a few commentators. He turns on the TV in the morning, watches one show, and goes to sleep watching the same network. But he's not listening to the rest of the Republican Party. If we go into a midterm election, we are in a midterm election cycle. Chances are, as it stands now, the Democrats will win the House majority. But if President Trump decides to fire, whether it is the Attorney General or the Deputy Attorney General or the Special Counsel, that creates an absolute crisis, an existential crisis for House Republicans in 48 districts, which is the number of competitive districts. Every Republican who goes to any campaign event can expect to get this question. Was the president right to do those firings, or was he wrong? If a Republican in a moderate district says he was right to do it, he loses independents. If he says he was wrong to do it, he loses Trump supporters. This may be, if the president does this to protect himself, he loses Republicans in the House of Representatives.
All right, we're going to sneak in a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the ways that Bob Mueller, while not political in any way, shape, or form, and you and I have spoken about this a lot, Frank, is doing things to protect his investigation, potentially from the president. We'll be right back.
Particularly this last week, has the president at any time thought about stepping down before or now?
No, and I think that's an absolutely ridiculous question. I gave you 2 questions, April. We're moving on. Jordan, go ahead.
It's not ridiculous.
Is it ridiculous?
I think he's considering all kinds of things right now, and I don't think it's ridiculous to think one of those things might be, how do I get out of here?
Well, and let's drill down on sort of the skeevy, icky category of all this. That there are things that Michael Cohen's been involved in. Michael Cohen has said that he would take a bullet for the president. I heard from a source last night that not only is that not the case, that he wouldn't even go to jail for the president. But we'll let them duke that out. If Michael Cohen was in the middle of hush money payments to women that the president had sexual relationships with, what could be in his records? What could the FBI and the Southern District, the U.S. attorneys be holding today?
Yeah, so while we're currently all thinking that this is primarily about what you refer to as the skeevy stuff, the bombshell that could be amongst all the documents and records seized yesterday could be some connection between the president and that skeevy stuff. So, for example, if there's records indicating that the president knew of the setup of a Delaware corporation to pay off Stormy Daniels, if he knew that there was someone sent to threaten her in a Las Vegas parking lot, if he knows about the capture and kill going on at the tabloid newspapers to silence stories, now you start weaving him into criminal conspiracies, Hobbs Act violations, threats, interstate travel to commit a threat. All
what Elliot Spitzer was ultimately caught doing when Elliot Spitzer's political career ended in D.C. on a skeevy?
Well, that can bring everybody down, right, eventually. And something's in those records that's going to mention Trump. I'm sure of it.
Hang on, let me just bring Jeremy Bash back into the conversation, who's now a powerful and elegant man about Washington, helped plan the raid that captured bin Laden. But let me ask you about Michael Avenatti and the porn star. Might he have had a point when he first sort of came out on his public relations blitz? Some people thought he was overly aggressive on the PR front, but it seems like the legal facts have caught up with the public arguments that he was making at the time, that perhaps the NDA was all along not valid because the president hadn't signed it. May we get to the bottom of the fact pattern there that either undergirds and supports his case or, as Frank suggests, reveals other damaging things for the president?
Yeah, and Matt Apuzzo earlier talked about what's been on the bingo card. Actually, campaign finance violations have been on the bingo card, but what hasn't been has been bank fraud and conspiracy to commit bank fraud. Because if Michael Cohen took out a loan to pay Stormy Daniels, he had to tell the bank, presumably, what the loan was for. Most times that's the case, and I'm sure he didn't say it's to pay hush money to Donald Trump's porn star girlfriend. And so if there's evidence in Michael Cohen's office, in his hotel room, or places of business that says that the president knew about that, then to Frank's point, the president could be guilty of conspiracy to commit bank fraud. That's a serious issue. And one thing we haven't really figured out is who would prosecute that? Would there be another special counsel that would have to be appointed? Would they put this under Bob Mueller, or would this be handled out of a regular U.S. attorney's office like the Southern District? I wanted to have this part of the conversation because it seemed to me, Frank, and you were on the phone for us yesterday, and we talked about this a little bit. It seemed to me like this was Bob Mueller in some ways protecting the integrity of the special counsel investigation into Russia by off-ramping this to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Is that a fair analysis?
This is a bit of insurance here because he's sending a message that I may go away someday, but these allegations and this case doesn't go away. I've got a state attorney general. I've got a U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York. And who else do I have out there that continue on long after I'm gone?
Yeah, I agree with that. The big lie that the president put forth yesterday, and I hate to call the president of the United States a liar because we all respect the presidency, but the big lie is that somehow Mueller is behind this or he did this. He used the words broke in. They broke in to my lawyer's office. No, it was a federal judge that authorized on evidence presented by FBI agents vis-a-vis U.S. attorneys, and they did it the proper way. And we all know the standard is going to be really high. If I'm the judge and you tell me you want to go get the president's attorney, you better show me a whole lot for me to sign up, because I know that history is going to judge me if I get this one wrong. The other thing I think worth mentioning, Nicole, is that all good lawyers, having been one and the other lawyers at the table, we create these things called CYA files. I won't say what those initials mean, but you all know what they mean. And he's got one, I promise you. If I'm involved in some scheme and I'm somebody's cover-upper in chief, I've covered myself. I've got some records somewhere so that if it all goes wrong, I can say, hey, he knew or she knew. I think he's got files.
What do you think?
Well, on Frank's point, I remember Mr. Mueller and Mr. Comey when they were both directors of the FBI briefing members of Congress on investigations, on national security crises, and they would always say the same thing. They would say, we will pursue the facts to a conclusion. Sometimes the facts change and you reach a different conclusion, as you well know. And the supposition that some make that this investigation was intended to pin down a campaign finance violation or something else may very well lead to things that will shock the American people.
At least you think we can still be shocked. We're now talking about a raid on Michael Cohen, who we spotted. Someone on my team spotted him in the lobby of Rockefeller Center. He's well known for going on TV and saying ludicrous things in defense of the president. He describes himself as a Ray Donovan-like figure. He boasted about protecting his friend. Michael Avenatti has leveled some pretty serious charges against him and his associates for intimidating Avenatti's client, Stormy Daniels, from the parking lot with his infant. I mean, this is sort of crossed the ludicrous to the potentially very criminally perilous terrain for the president.
If I had to predict just on the moment Donald Trump entered this race on escalators and talking about Mexicans crossing the border to become racist, and he keeps upping the